Nasika Hadas, I think you're muted. Can you hear us?
Shalom, shalom. I was speaking on mute. Shalom, shalom. Tara Rabba Atoti Eshulata. Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shavuot for some, Kodesh Tov, Rosh Kodesh, and Chag Sameach, Hannuka. Such an auspicious time, deeply potent time of feminine energy that this mood is so appropriate. This is a powerful portal, as I mentioned earlier, to our sister group. We are in so much of the igul of the igul of the igul. We are in so much of the feminine space. We are truly in the Challal, in this day in which we honor the the new moon, the dark face of the moon, the hidden or the veiled face of Shekhinah. This is also our Shabbat, in which we say Boi Kala. We welcome the Shabbat bride, the rectified Shekinah in all her splendor and glory, the Hadara, the splendorous crown, the Ata, the rectified and elevated Shekinah, the elevated Malkut, Shabbat Malketa. And of course, Hanukkah is all about the fixing of the Halal, as our Master Chief Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu Shaddai has so greatly and powerfully elucidated and illuminated for us in his limud of Hanukkah. And it is fitting that as of now, in my time zone, it is still the sixth day of Hanukkah. Tonight, after Havdalah, after sundown, of course, we will be entering the seventh night of Hanukkah. But the sixth night is very auspicious for reasons we will understand as I go further into the mood. So, of course, I always trust Ein Sof. I always trust the divine alignment. And everything happens exactly when and how it's supposed to. So I'm very excited about this mood today. It will be a little short. I'll try to run through it to have time to get into the the mitzvot of Shabbat and get ready for the lighting of the Chanukiah or the Chanukiot of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. So let's get into it. Where we left off last in my second Niddah, we were speaking about the secret of the shedets in the alley and all the incredible creatures that are defined as the shedets. And I also want to say, it is a little dim here in this space. I think it's fitting for Hanukkah. As we know, Hanukkah is the celebration of lights, the feast of lights, the two lights, the Poshek, which is light, the Or Hatanus, and the Or, the light. This is my study space for those who are wondering. In the wisdom of our Nusach Afriki, the wisdom of our sages, we know that when you are doing Torah study, Esek Torah, you have your own secluded, special, sacred, and set apart space, your sanctified space for study. So I just have my little curtains up and it has a little ambiance. And for me, it's fitting because it's enclosed in these curtains like veils. It is kind of like a womb-like space in which to study. And Torah itself is likened to a womb, the womb of wisdom. So that's where I am in this beautiful pockets, this little corner of wisdom. So we were studying Midah about the shedets in the alley and the array of interesting little creatures that creep through the alley. And even that language is very intentional. The shedets in the alley represents the residual or creeping, lingering tuma of the klipa, the lingering impurity of nidah itself, the lingering impurity indeed of nakash that was left at the hinges of the door, kala, and that impurity of nakash rectified through the gilgul of Amsalai, the mother of Abraham, who was defiled forcefully by Terach in her Niddah, literally while in the state of Niddah, and reincarnated in her Igul as Dina for her violation to be the fixing or the rectification of what came before, and the impurity of Niddah was transferred to Shechem, and thus Dina was purified, and subsequently through the Brit Milah, through the rectification of Yesod, which I'm putting emphasis on that for reasons we'll elucidate later, but the rectification of Yesod, which Yesod is both the feminine and male organ of foundation. So both Yesods were rectified. And we understand that Hanukkah is all about the rectification of the Challal, the womb space, the feminine Yesod. And Shechem, having been transferred, having had the Niddah of Dina transferred for her purification onto him, then he likewise was subsequently purified through the Brit Milah. That was the rectification of the Yesod. So, connecting this to Niddah, connecting this to the Shedets in the alley, we understand that these are nocturnal creatures as well. These are creatures of the night. Lila is the night, the domain of Lilith. And so these are things to think about. We have to put all of these pieces together, all of these codes, all of these associations and connotations to understand the broader picture. The alley itself is a liminal space, similar to a crossroads even. Liminality indicates space that is in between, space that is neither here nor there, space that is neither inner nor external. In Mishnah Shabbat, we speak and learn about the Carmelit as that space of neutrality, and even more accurately, that space of transcendence of duality, in which all is unified, in which there's simultaneously mixture and nullification. So in a space of liminality, you have pure and impure. And simultaneously, you have neither. You have something that encompasses both and it yet is far above and beyond both. And in truth, you understand that all is one. That is the true transcendence. And so an alley represents that neutral space, that liminal space, that space of mixing. And it's a transitional space in which these nocturnal animals, the Shadets, creep and crawl. And indeed, a space in which creep and crawl even nocturnal people. What did the old song say? The freaks come out at night. So we understand that certain spirits dwell with and walk with and within people as vessels during certain times of the night. This is why we must take care in our actions and the spaces that we dwell in. Where are we? Are we in transition? Are we outside? And even in our modern culture, we know that that's part of our everyday language, our slang, our colloquialisms. We outside. And what is that usually associated with? People who are partying, people who are being promiscuous, the city girls. And we know that alley itself, as I alluded to briefly at the end of last week's mood, in the South in particular, when someone is called alley, it's someone who's like that proverbial city girl, someone who's ratchet, usually associated with a female who's ratchet, who's promiscuous, who's immoral, who's loose. She's outside. And so, again, we take what is in the text, we take what is in Torah, we take the wisdom of the sages, the wisdom of our ancestors, and we even take the wisdom of even the language that we use even unconsciously today. And we see the echoes of what is revealed. And again, there's nothing new under the sun. So even the language we use today, the codes, the slang, they still reaffirm and reinforce the same meanings and codes of the ancestors and the sages. These transitional spaces represent transcendence and even that which is hidden. We know the feminine dimension is everything that is hidden, the kosher, everything that is veiled. This is why, as I always emphasize, the wife as well as the kedushet are veiled. And that's a mystery for those who know. So the veiling of the feminine, even the oracles in the old days, the days of the Pythia, the Sibyls, the ancient oracles would be veiled. The prophetesses, the diviners, the women who spoke prophecy, they would wear veils. These are things to think about. The hidden wisdom, the feminine dimension that is internal, the interior mysteries. And so this nocturnal, transitional, liminal space is also something that we can see in the cabarets and nightclubs, the jazz clubs back in the day, the blues, the juke joints, and even at one point in time when hip hop itself was underground. Everything that is part of our darkness, let's say, our melanated artistry and prophecy, even through music and melody, has always been associated with something that has to be hidden. Again, if you look at the timeline, back in the day, jazz was considered the devil's music. So was blues. So was hip hop. Everything that starts with us is underground. It is hidden until it becomes revealed and becomes whitewashed in the mainstream. And then it becomes palatable when the potency of our ancestral spirit is taken out of it. So we think of all this when we think of the alley. And even when we think of some of those, what do we call them? Even in our language here in America, we say the hole in the wall, them little hole in the wall joints, them hole in the wall clubs, those were the clubs where you really got down. You know, those were the ones that you didn't really know about. They weren't mainstream, but those were the ones where you really felt the most free. So again, think about the ways in which our modern language and codes reaffirm and reinforce the hints at the mysteries of the ancient language and the ancient understanding. So these transitional spaces that are associated with certain nocturnal animals, people, and spirits, entities. In fact, in the Brazilian spirituality of Kimbanda, the Exus and the Pombageiras, this is their realm. The streets, the corners, the crossroads, the alleyways, and they are associated with the Povo de Rua, the children of the street, the people of the street, the prostitutes, the gangsters, the dealers. And even in that, we see the nobility in what most people would see as monsters. This unique alchemy to understand, again, the holy sparks we are meant to recognize and to draw out and to elevate in the Kedusha from the klipa of what appears to be holiness, because in many ways the klipa is just a mask. In many ways the klipa is a false label that we can put on something that appears impure or infernal or dark. But what is the real light that is inside? This is the Or Haganus, that hidden light. That light that is in fact so high, so brilliant, so bright, so splendorous, so glorious, that everyone can't or is not meant to perceive it. And that, again, in the larger macrocosm of these layers of metaphor, that is us, as the Foshek, the melanated people, the black people, the people who were despised, who were made the proverb and the byword, who were mocked, who were veiled, whose identity was distorted and usurped, seen as the monster. And even in the collective consciousness, what are we mostly seen as? Unfortunately, chas v'shalom, black man, black woman, seen as mostly thugs, gangsters, ratchet, alley, prostitutes, over sexualized, hypersexualized, deviant, dark, associated with black magic. So we have to pay attention and put all these pieces together in this puzzle. So this alley, again, if you remember when I was breaking down the definitions of all of these animals, the Shedets, a commonality of all of these different creatures defined in this verse was that they dwelled in liminal spaces, cracks and crevices, which also makes me think of, in some senses, the Baal Peor, the impurity and the sexual immorality of the Israelites at Baal Peor, who defiled themselves with the Midianite and Moabite women. Because Baal Peor, some scholars define the very name as the master or the lord of the cleft, just like the cleft in the rock. The cleft, which is a crack, a crevice, a fold, a an almost obscured entryway in which something must make itself smaller to creep in. And the Shedets, many of the creatures associated with the Shedets are likened to mice or rodents. And an interesting phenomenon I heard once, and it never left my mind, is that apparently rats can flatten themselves. They can displace all of their bones to flatten themselves to be able to maneuver through cracks and crevices. They can even flatten themselves to go under doors. I always thought that was interesting and terrifying. And it always stuck with me. I heard it when I was a little girl and it never left me. But so again, the ability to lower yourself, again, I'm putting specific emphasis on these words, lowering yourself, making yourself smaller, diminishing yourself, hiding yourself to fit in and through these liminal, transitional, transcendent spaces. Spaces of impurity. We saw in Tractate Niddah that the discovery of a woman's bleed was compared to the discovery of the Shedets in the alley. And the interpretations on the cleanliness of the alley and the retroactive tumah. That was the commonality between these two Mishnahot. The idea of applying retroactive impurity upon the discovery of the woman discovering her blood or the discovery of the Shedets, the unclean animal in the alley. And there was discussion on whether the alley had been cleaned thoroughly by sweeping or by the rain washing the alley clean. And so these two phenomena are themselves metaphorical in a way, because if we think of what is the contrast between sweeping an alley and the rain washing it clean and its level of purification, we know that rain purifies, water purifies, flowing living water purifies, as in a mikveh. A mikveh itself is only valid if it has flowing, living, natural water, not municipal water, not water sourced from man-made locations. And also, if we think about sweeping, that's a human action, something done with human hands. Sweeping with a broom of some sort, where something may be cleaned partially, but we know that humans are prone to error. Something may have been overlooked. Something may not have been fully swept. Whereas the rain symbolizes the divine flow, a shefa of sorts, a spiritual cleansing and purification, a flow of life, living waters. And it is the water that purifies. There was also some interesting points in the Mishnah about the urine of the woman and whether the urine was adequate enough to have washed away the residual humah, likened to the rain in the alley. The urine represents waste that is carried out, washed away. This could be the impurity of nakash that is clinging literally at the hinges of the womb of Challal, not inside the womb, but at the hinges. And we spoke about what the hinges were the code for. So it represents a clarification after an extraction. The urine itself carries waste from the body, unused nutrients, as well as the blood itself. The blood itself, our menses, removes that which it's no longer useful in the body. We know that what is literally physically carried out through the course of Niddah, menses, is the unused endometrial lining, the lining of the uterus that would have eventually held and surrounded the growing egg and fetus and the baby to then become the placenta, which science actually now says that the placenta, the quality of the placenta is contingent upon the quality of the man's DNA and the man's seed. So that's also interesting. But obviously, when the egg is not fertilized, that lining is not useful and it decays. It's not living, it's not growing, it's not sustaining or nourishing anything because the baby is not growing, and it is removed from the body. The menses is that removal of that thing which no longer serves, no longer nourishes or progresses life. And this is what is being detoxed, essentially, from the body. The menses is a detox, it is a purification. So these traces of that blood being washed away are the dinim, the geburot, being passed through and washed away. And we know water is chesed, the purification or the sweetening of dinim, washing away the geburot. The alley is a threshold. Not only is it a liminal space, it is not a space in which something dwells or settles in. It is not a space in which something lives. It is not a space in which something stays. It is a transitory space that something passes through. This is likened to the Yesod in the writings of Ari HaKadosh. A passage through into or out of the body that is likened to a city. As I briefly alluded to last week, the city and even the city girl, the proverbial outside alley girl, the city represents malkut unrectified. So if we think about the juxtaposition between a city as a place of impurity, a place of mixing, a place where you see any and everything, a city is likened to a huge marketplace, a shuk. And you deal in flesh, you deal in vanity, you deal in arrogance and pride, you deal in lust. That's what the city has always represented. Allegorically, even and especially in classical literature, In all of literature, we're always telling the same story. Every book, every film, every song, even, is always the same story. The city always represents the places of dark desires, lusts, and covetousness. The city is the place where you see more. There's more people. It's overpopulated. It's crowded. It's people from every nation, especially if we think of somewhere like New York, classically, or right now, Atlanta is becoming that new place where everybody, it's the new Babylon. It's the new Sodom and Gomorrah, some may even say. It's the place where everyone from all over the world comes, different cultures mixing and intermingling. Um, every desire. People come from the country and come to the city and their minds are blown. Immigrants come from other countries and oh my gosh, all the technology, everything you could ever dream of, things you never even dreamed of, you never even imagined, you never even knew you could acquire something like this. You can buy that. Everything is for sale. Everything is available. Yeah. Everything is to trigger your covetousness, your pride, your vanity. It's a place of impurity compared to the field, the country, the land, the ancestral land, where you have the purity of your ideals, your ethics, your morals. You have that connection with nature. You have that connection with the stillness, the sweetness, the harmony of nature. And we discussed briefly as well the different stages of femininity, from the karka'a, the deserted, dry place, the wilderness, the unyielding soil, the hardened soil that must be broken up in order to soften and plant seed. And we know that Sadeh, the field, is that place where the woman has become receptive to the man, to receive his seed, to receive his spirit, to receive his wisdom, to receive his Torah, his light. Receptiveness, the true nature of femininity. Femininity is literally the receiver, the nukba, that which is penetrated, that which is filled. But with what? We are all vessels. We just have to consider who and what we are a vessel for. So the city is juxtaposed with Sadeh, the field. And Sadeh is Malkut. On Shabbat, Sadeh becomes the field of sacred apples. This sanctified space, still the Challal, that proverbial womb-like space. So we're always talking about rectification, the rectification of the Hay, the Nukba, the final Hay, the Malkut, the Shekinah that is in exile, that must be freed like those holy sparks drawn out from Dinah, even from the captive woman of Ki Tetse. The holy spark drawn out as she ascends to Hamakom Elyon, to Ima Ilah Dinah. And when rectified, the field, Sadeh, can even be likened to the temple, a place of purity, a place of sanctification, as Shekinah echoes the Mishkan, the holy temple, the holy tabernacle, the dwelling place. Shekinah herself called it the dwelling place. It is said that the reason we invite with such pomp and circumstance and reverence the Shabbat bride, Shabbat Malketa, Allah, the Challal, we invite her as this queen to come in and dwell with and among us and even within us to an extent, because it is said that the king will not occupy his throne until the queen enters. So Hakadosh Baruch Hu, which is Ziarampin, the Vav, the 6 lower Sefirot, it is not until he is joined with his bride, his Shekinah, the 7th Malkut, that he is rectified himself in that union and becomes that Tiferet. So Shekinah is, in a sense, the rectified form as Sadeh, the field, Malkut, the rectified form of Lilith, the Karka'a, or even the alley, the city. So that's a kind of parallel and juxtaposition that you can understand through this imagery, through this encoded imagery. And in understanding the necessity of this rectification of Shekinah, then we come into the beauty of what Hanukah represents. So Hanukah, we know that Hanukah, like Halal, begins with the letter H, which is the gematria of the number 8. And Halal is Het Lamed Lamed. So Het, 8, and 2 Lamed. So Lamed itself is gematria value of 30. But if you look at Lamed, Lamed is this beautiful, almost androgynous letter. If you literally look at the shape of the Lamed, you see Yashar and Igul at the same time. You see this straight line descending, and you see this curvature that also is very reminiscent of the body of a pregnant woman. So you have within the structure of Lamed itself, you have the Kaf and the Vav. So you have 20 plus 6, which is also interesting because the Vav, again, the Yashar aspect of Lamed, the masculine aspect of Lamed is the Vav, which is 6, which represents again the Arampim. Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So with Kaf Vav, you have 26, which is the gematria of the Tetragrammaton. And with 2 Lameds, you are to understand in Halal, you have Pet or Hanukkah, and the 2 Lameds represent the 2 lights, the Koshek and the Or. And when you multiply the 2 Lameds, 26 plus 26, you have 52, which is Nun Bet, which is the name Ban. And an interesting thing I remember Chief Rabbi Pinchas teaching last year around this time. Actually, interestingly enough, I'm looking at my notes, and it was on the 8th of Tevet, 5785, the eighth day. So again, back to that 8. But I remember in Parshat Vayigash, in the mood, you can find it on YouTube. Chief Rabbi Pinchas gave an interesting elucidation of when Yaakov went down to Egypt and Hashem reveals himself to Yaakov. So, let me know if you all can see the screen. And what you should be seeing.
Okay.
Yes, was that up the Ashula?
Okay, the screen can be seen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Nasikatasa?
Okay, Nasikadina, yeah.
No, I was just making sure that you can hear us as well. We can see the screen, Ken.
Okay, actually, I couldn't. I had to take it off of the Bluetooth. So, I hear you now. So you're seeing Bereshit 46 and 2, right?
Okay. Yes, we can see your screen.
But I can't see it now, so let me. Are you still seeing it? Or are you seeing the Google window?
I'm seeing your screen. And it's also what's your screen is up.
Okay. Uh, um, I'm not yet, so I have to read. Okay. Hold on. Well, anyway, so we see God called to Israel in a vision by night. Yaakov, Yaakov. He answered, here, Hineni. So, to make a long story short, Yaakov is the gematria of 182 times 2 is 364. 364 is Ban, the Beit Nun, or the Nun Bet, the name of 52, 7 times. So what's interesting is Hashem reveals himself to Yaakov, calling his name twice in the middle of the night. And this is Lila. This is the realm of the feminine dimension. So this name, the milieu of the divine name of the night, is this bond, the dimension of Bathsheba, the daughter of 7, or even the house of 7, Beit Sheba, which is interesting. So even if we think of Malkat Sheba, the queen of Sheba, and we think of Lilith even as the queen of the night, and there are many sources and scholars who liken Lilith even to the Queen of Sheba herself. But that's another story. So this Queen of the Night is connected to Malkuth, the feminine, and the Bat Sheba, the daughter of 7, is also the wife of Aharon, the Kohen Kagadol. And so Aharon himself was married to the night, this feminine aspect of night, of darkness. And when you understand this connection again with the Ban, the name of 52, with Malkuth, the final Hay, the Shekinah, the daughter aspect, because if you think of Ima as the mother, you can also think of Nukba as the daughter, or should I say the daughter-in-law, because she is the wife, the Nukba of Zerandim, who can be seen as the son, the prince of Abba and Ima. And when you think of Nun Bet, the letters of this Ban, 52, Nun is also likened to seed itself, the Zerah. And we can think of this as seed in the house. Nun Bet, seed in Bait. Zerah in Bait. So seed in the Shekinah, or even fed by the Shekinah, the offspring. Because Shekinah herself is called the house in her greatest rectified form. So she goes from being Karka'a to Sadeh, the field, and then to the house, specifically Halal being the house where the Sephirot were born. Sephirot as the seeds, as the offspring. And it is literally through the Kav, the Kaf Vav, the pipe, the masculine aspect, which itself is androgynous. The Kav is not merely Yashar, it's not merely a straight line. It is inclusive of Igul, spirals, and Yashar, more likened to a corkscrew rather than simply a straight line. So again, this is the Kaf and the Vav of which Lamed itself is comprised. And it is through the Kav that the light of Or Ein Sof comes from the Kalal through the pipe. Again, this transitory space where something passes through to give that light, Or Ein Sof, and spread that light to the Sefirot, which in the 7 days are rectified as the 7 kings. And so the 52 is the bond, which is Malkut rectified. And when we add this 52, this 26 plus 26, this Chaf Vav plus Chaf Vav, which is Lamed Lamed, the 2 Lameds of Halal, Hate Lamed Lamed. So when we put all this together, we understand that with these 8 days, the Ket that is the prefix, let's say, of Hannuka, the first letter of Hannuka, in these 8 days, we have this rectification of the Shekinah as this womb space, the fixing of the Kalal. And the 8th king, Hadar, is again and always the only king that is mentioned with a wife. So it is the rectification by unification of the masculine and feminine. That is where perfection happens. The 7 kings that died, which were the shattering of the vessels, are those who were from the side of Gevurah, because there was no balance. There was no balance in that masculine energy. And thus it is with Hadar, who, like Ze'erampin, when he is rectified through union with his Nukba, Malkut Shekinah, then ascends in that perfection. This 8th king, like the 8th day, a new thing is created. This is the new and perfected reality that we await and that we celebrate on the 8th day, not only of Hanukkah, but also Shemini Atzeret. So this Kav of this Lamed is that androgyny as unity. That Kav, Kaf Vav, is that pipe, the liminality through which light is disseminated throughout the world. This light that we celebrate as and on and in and during Hanukkah. This unity that is the Carmelite. The Carmelite, where all things are pure, that is mirrored as this alley. As I said, this alley, this transitional liminal space where purity and impurity dwell and mix together and pass through. But the holy and divine mirror of that is that Carmelite, that neutral space, that transitory liminal space that is likened itself to Gan Eden. So it is fitting that today, as of now in my time zone, It is the 6th day of Hanukkah, which in the Kavanot of the Pohot Otiot of the Beged Kaporet of our Nusak Afiki, the 6th day is associated with Zerah, fertility, and Yesod, the rectification of Yesod. So how beautiful that we're even having this limud on this day that epitomizes and embodies the rectification of Yesod, as again, the Challal, the womb itself, is the feminine Yesod. And just as we ended in our reading of Niddah, the last text we actually read was where it literally says that a woman who cohabits with a man on Niddah transfers her impurity to him. Again, we see Dina's rectification and purification as the embodiment of that Malkut, that Hay, that Nutva. She, as the Yugul of Lilith, was rectified and purified through transferring that Niddah onto Shechem. And also, we must never forget, lest we demonize Shechem, because in the end, he too, the prince, he was the prince, he was rectified by the Brit Milah, the circumcision. So he was made sanctified. So again, Hanukkah, we're talking about fixing the Challal, purifying the Yesod, rectifying Malkut and Shekinah, and inviting that Shefa of Zerah, fertility. In fact, it is a segula to pray with the Kavanot during Hanukkah for couples to give birth, to conceive, and to have successful births and successful marriages and shalom bayit. All of this is the domain of Hanukkah and the Kavanot of Hanukkah. This is the most auspicious and potent time to pray for exactly these matters. The matters of the home, bayit, again, noon bet, 52, feed in the house. So you pray for good children, shalom bayit. You pray for a good marriage, good intimacy. You pray for conception. You pray for fertility. This is that time. These are the kavanot of Hanukkah. And here we are on the 6th day. For zerah, for fertility, for the rectification of Yesod. So, Baruch Hashem. I will land there. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen. Chag Sameach Hanukkah. Rosh Kodesh Kodesh Tov. Shabbat Shalom and Shabbat Tov.